Thank you, Zoltan, very much, and Peter. So now we can open the floor to the questions. I believe we have the mic. Oh, it's right there. Alex?
Alejandro Chafuen, Alex from the Acton Institute. First, congratulations to you both. And I would love, I don't know if you can share whatever you have in writing, some here to another event and trying to absorb your vision from Europe, which is exactly the vision that should drive, or we think drives the Acton Institute, where we ground everything on our vision of the human person, but unfortunately, due to the interest of perhaps donors and political forces, we sometimes engage in battles with people with whom we share the anthropology, but we have difference on economic policy here and there, on security, and I think it's very damaging for the free society that instead of those of us who have similar views about the human person, we divide the enemies of socialism and totalitarianism and make them easy for them to win. My question here is that I have devoted most of my academic life to study the great teachers of human rights that came out of the late scholastic period, the commentators of St. Thomas. If you go to the United Nations, or if you go even to the Human Rights Commission in Geneva, or to the OAS, the statue there is to Francisco de Vitoria, the founder of the School of Salamanca, who absorbed in Sorbonne many of the ideas of the continental Europe, Dominicans, Franciscans, and basically he's seen as the great champion of human rights, not only economic rights, he was a great champion of free trade, but also the rights of sinners. He said, like the gospel, God makes the sun rise for the bad people and the good people. But then he was very strict on all things that have to do with life, morality. Another champion that has been used by the left, Bartolomé de las Casas, was hardcore on conservative principles and traditional values. So my question is, have you looked into this tradition, because it might help us in the dialogue with other moralists that now are ambivalent or sometimes even side with the enemy in this great struggle to defend true human rights?
Thank you. It's a very complex question. It's really hard to answer that, but maybe the most important, and I can speak only on behalf of myself, how to view the human rights question and the respect of human rights in Europe, that so my problem is with that concept that after the Second World War, of course there were a lot of reasons to do that, but after the Second World War, in a very rapid way, the European community and Western leaders started to get rid of the guideline of Christianity and the Bible when they were trying to understand the living together and the legal framework of how societies should function and what the content of certain human rights are. Because of course we need a non-religious state respecting the secularity of the state, but if we get rid of the concept and the guidelines of Christianity or the Judeo-Christian value system, the certain human rights are gonna have no real content at all in the future, and I think that's the current confusion, what the content of human rights are, and that's the problem, how certain political powers have used the concept of human rights, are using as a blackmailing tool, or maybe just they justify their actions, their evil actions, on referring to human rights, because you can fulfill with any kind of content because you lost intentionally the real principles and roots which were rooted back into the Judeo-Christian heritage. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that popped into my mind when you were talking about our vision of the concept of European human rights.
I think Christianity, of course, has this idea very at the heart of it, basically. But all religions implore us to respect human dignity, to recognize it, and to respect it. And this is the basis out of which everything grows out of in the realms of fundamental rights, I believe. This is the basis upon which we can recognize these rights. That gives us the ability to, because whatever we, as a whole, as the human race, to be a little bit... what gives us the power to recognize these rights is basically our shared belief, thanks to our religious and ethical traditions, to recognize, understand, and respect human dignity.
Thank you very much. I think we have another one.
Is it loud? No. Thank you both very much. Let me say that it's clear to me that it's very necessary to engage as you are engaging in this battle over the terminology, the meaning, and the application of human rights, and that you're putting that at the forefront of public engagement in Hungary. So that's point one. I don't want you to misunderstand that. But secondly, coming from, although I live in Croatia, and being really quite pleased that I live in Croatia, but I'm pleased that I come from this Anglo-Saxon background which seeks always clarity about terminology and exactly what we mean. I'm very unhappy about the way in which the expression human rights is used at all. And I think that the problems that you have outlined about the fourth generation, I think, of these human rights really come from being far too accepting of the third generation, the second generation, and not really being terribly clear about the first generation. And it often happens, you know, that a poisoned source of a small trickle comes down and produces a very, very dangerous flood. And that, of course, is what we have here, that rights, Burke says, in answer to this, he says, and I wouldn't necessarily say that his formulation is absolutely the last word, but it's useful. He says, specifically talking about the rights of man and of the citizen of 1789, that men have the right that their wants, by which he means needs in this case, needs should be attended to. That's my word. Now that is a very practical view. And the reason that he took that was, of course, partly because anybody who has read that 1789 document knows that it is muddled. We must remember the program for one of the worst, most horrible events in human history, namely the French Revolution. And the idea that we should actually be going back to that and regarding it as some kind of source of inspiration or even validity now seems to me to be ridiculous. Again, coming from this English pragmatic background, I would say that what comes before every right is a duty. And you first of all have to argue about what the duties of the state are, what the duties of individuals are. And we also have to distinguish between what good behavior, I'm a Christian, I try to behave well, frequently I do not succeed, but I try. We have to distinguish between what good behavior would require and what is absolutely forbidden. Now, I would say that if we want to go back to human rights, that we have to go back to, surely we can just about all agree on the Ten Commandments. Now, the Ten Commandments, two things particularly, it says various other things, but thou shalt not kill, and that is the basis of course, why abortion is so dreadful. but also, of course, the taking of all innocent life is wrong. Thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt not steal, which is the basis of the right of property. Now, I think that a greater clarification of these matters, not suggesting that you as lawyers and experts in fighting the battle of the coalface can exactly get into all of this, but in our own minds, I think that this is extremely important. So I am inclined to say that we must distinguish between rights and claims, and we should limit these rights far more, for example, than was limited in the 1948 International Declaration. That's basically my contribution, which you may think is right or wrong.
Never ceases to surprise me how upset the British gentleman can still be with the French Revolution. The younger people in the room will probably not sympathize with the complete disdain that I share with you over the French Revolution, but that the realization will come in time, I suppose. You need to live a little bit more for that. As far as the Ten Commandments, I always like to say that that was the first written constitution of humankind. The first list that endeavored to organize human society in a way that is proper. It contains things that are forbidden. It is very important, therefore, that, as you stressed, that we are very clear on what the individuals must do and what the state must do, but also what the individuals must not do and the state must not do. This is on which a civilized society based on tolerance among its members can be organized upon. The problem that I see today is that we sort of abandon these obligations, the positive ones and negative ones, and we are trying to build societies, not we, our adversaries in the political realm, who are in the majority and a dominant position in Europe right now. They are trying to build a society based on wants and desires and the momentary feeling of the individual. I have an inclination to do this, therefore I can do this. And we disregard what we must and must not do. And the other thing is, what you refer to is that the concepts are not clearly defined anymore. And yes, that's the case. This is the 21st century. This is the age of the postmodern. Our adversaries are clearly and obviously working towards deconstructing fundamental concepts that we all used to agree upon. The most simple example that I can give to you for this phenomenon is that a couple of years ago, the Hungarian National Assembly was forced to amend the Hungarian constitution to include a line that says that the father is a man, the mother is a woman. The mother is a woman. It became necessary based upon the trends and tendencies we see to the west of us, because they are trying to deconstruct the meaning of father. They are trying to deconstruct the meaning of woman. Ask an American Democrat what a woman is. You know what they will do. I'm not a biologist. I think you've all seen that viral video from Congress. But these are extremely dangerous things. So I can put it in humorous terms, but perhaps I should not. These are dangerous. They are depriving the meaning from the term woman. And what we are left is an emptiness. Another such thing that they are doing is, they were very active with this in Hungary a couple of years ago, maybe in 2019, maybe 2020. Family is family. If you define something in that obvious tautology, family is family, that serves to destroy the very concept of the thing that you are trying to define. This definition, family, is like a tree is a tree. You don't know what a tree is from this definition. You don't know what a family is from this definition. So the only purpose it can serve is to destroy the concept of the family. So these things must be resisted with all our might. A family is based upon the marriage of one woman and one man. The purpose of it is to bring children to the world, to raise them to be happy, stable, prosperous individuals who will then contribute to society. That is what family is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Come on, young people.
Okay, so maybe you can think about it. I'll maybe in the meantime ask, I have a few things that I'm really curious about. I'm not sure the time will allow us, but I think we didn't really touch too much on it throughout these few days. And one thing that, I'm observing, and I believe all of us do, is that the people who think otherwise, different from ourselves, and they have every right to do so, what is kind of scary for me that we are coming to the point of violence. So Zoltan has mentioned the recent elections in Italy, and I think we have all heard the statement of our marvelous EU commissioner, who essentially said, well, if it doesn't go in this direction, we have tools. And so what is kind of concerning for me is not the fact that she has said it, but how have we arrived to this point, that you are free to think what I think, but otherwise we may need to do something about it. So I'm just wondering, if you could maybe give us a brief view from your own, point, what has happened in your understanding? And Robin has mentioned the generations from the first to the fourth, whereas we sort of are waking up one day and you are either with us or against us, and it will have consequences. So there is no dialogue. The dialogue is you think what I tell you to think. So I'm just wondering if you can share a bit your own view on that.
It might be a very harsh opinion about that, but when it comes to progressive leftist ideology, and it might be an oversimplification, especially when we are talking about the referred leader of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who is by origin not a progressive leftist, but anyway she serves the concept and the idea of the progressive left, which is the mainstream right now in Brussels, whether we are talking about the Commission or the Parliament. Of course, the Council is a different story, but anyway, let's say the so-called Brussels deep state are influenced strongly by the mainstream progressives. And my point is that the progressive leftist idea's core is totalitarian. And that's the problem with the progressives. So they are by heart believing that the only concept of maintaining a society or a government is according to their belief system. And if something is contrary to this ideology, and that's the problem with ideologies, they think that they have a ready answer for every societal question, which is not a pragmatic approach. And that is the most important distinguishment between conservatives and all other ideologies, liberals or socialists or progressive or Greens or whatever, that we conservative do not think that there is a ready answer for all challenges in societies or in our individual lives. We are pragmatics and we adjust our answers and we are solving our problems in a pragmatic way, what serves the best of our societies and ourselves. And that's my point, that of course the whole Western world become more divided than it was ever before in the modern days after the Second World War, of course. But the progressives became very open and clear about their intention to organize the societies accordingly to their ideology and get rid of all other solutions and concepts of leading a society or giving different answers apart from their belief system. And the core is that it has always been kind of a totalitarian concept or ideology.
So let's take this opportunity to discuss why the Great French Revolution was such a horrible idea. That's where this is coming from. That's when this was first instituted by the left. The notion that if you don't agree with me, I will hit you over the head with a stick. or a guillotine. That's where it comes from. This is in the nature of the modern European and by extension Western left. They will punish you if you disagree with them over anything. And the more points you make, the closer you are to being clearly right, the more viciously they are going to try and punish you. The worst crime that a conservative can commit in the eyes of a socialist is be right. And you need to accept that. That's for the rest of your lives. You will have to fight these fights, and they will get angry with you, and they will get angrier the closer to the truth you are. So just accept that. And the other thing that I got reminded of by Ursula's comments is a quote from Stalin. Push the bayonet, push it until you hit resistance. Then withdraw and try at a different spot. And that's what they are doing. But there were quotes from Juncker who were reminiscent of Stalin's quote as well. This is what the European bureaucratic left is basically doing. They are pushing until they meet resistance. And then they are outraged when there is resistance, because they are leftists and liberals, and they are outraged by any sort of, by the word no. They are outraged by that.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question, maybe?
Hi everyone. My name is Nikola. Thank you for your insightful comments. One of the quotes we heard during the past panels was a quote by Napoleon. He said that one newspaper is worth like one regiment. So I was wondering, what are the ways in which we can counter the monopoly that the left has over the media? Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not going to be popular with the British gentleman sitting in the room, but Napoleon was a wise man, in this regard at least. His understanding that public perception can be manipulated, and the news media is a wonderful way of manipulating public perception was well ahead of his time, and credit goes where it's due. Your question is, what can we do about this, right? It's an uphill struggle, and it seems like impossible probably to many of you, because I don't know about the media landscape here in Croatia. I assume it's quite overwhelmingly liberal. Yes. It's like the European media landscape now. The one thing that, this takes time, it takes work, and of course it takes money. But this is what you have to do, what we all have to do. We have to build our own conservative institutions, because the liberal and the leftist institutions will not serve our purpose. They are designed to thwart us, to stop us, to prevent us. We have to build our own institutions, and that very much includes media. You simply need to have conservative journalists, you need to have conservative newspapers, you need to have conservative TV channels. And it's a lot of work, and it doesn't happen from one day to the next. It takes many, many years and dedicated people to do this. But that is the only way, and that's only part of the job, because we need to build a lot of conservative institutions. And then we need to have these conservative institutions cooperate on the international scene, because without an efficient cooperation of conservative forces, there's very little that we can do to stop the global left and their crusade against us. So you have to work hard, and you have to create your own media. You should not expect the leftist media to include your point of view. When they do include it, they will give it a context that deprives of your point of view of its original meaning. It's not fair, but that's how they play. And by the way, this is why we should never be playing according to their rules. Have you heard about CPAC? I was at CPAC Hungary in May this year, and Prime Minister Viktor Orban delivered a speech on this exact subject. And his first rule was, prescription for conservative success was never played by the liberals' rules. And I think the last one was that we have to build our own institutions. So these, I think, the two most important things that we need to take away.
Thank you, Zoltan. Do we have any other questions?
I live in Budapest. I'm at the Danube Institute, and of course I know the work that you do, and I congratulate you on it. Excuse me. But I have two questions really about political strategy. Obviously, in each country it will be somewhat different. In the Western world as a whole, I include obviously Hungary and Central Europe in it, there are really three divisions, aren't there? There are conservatives, there are liberals, and there are progressives. The progressives are making all the running, and they have been successful, amazingly so far. But they're now intruding very seriously upon the position of the liberals. Now, as in the 1960s, when liberals came under attack from progressives in the context of the Vietnam War and American liberalism, the liberals split in two. Do you see that as a potential strategy in any other country, but also in your country, in Hungary? It is slightly different because the conservatism is the dominant ideology there, and seems likely to remain so for some time, even if things go wrong in various ways. So do you see the opportunity for political strategy that divides our opponents and brings liberals onto our side? Second question is, let me apply that same question to sexuality. We see in Britain and America, feminists and gay people are now very disturbed and hostile to the woke progressivism on gender ideology, because they reckon that it actually threatens to eliminate them as a complete class of people. They will use terms like eliminationist to describe gender ideology. Again, is that something, do you see, applying in Hungary as a political strategy for conservatives or not? And does that mean, what attitude should we take to sexual minorities who are hostile to the gender ideology?
One, two, three, okay. Didn't manage to destroy the mic in one attempt. Okay. So this is two questions, but a single question. Could be brought together into a single question. And I think the answer to, so the thing that I believe in is that somebody who is not actively hostile to us is potentially our friend. I am a positive person in this sense. So yes, we should reach out towards the liberals. And yes, we should reach out towards, for lack of a better word, normal homosexuals. Let me explain this here for a second. Sexual taste is a private matter. It's difficult for me to understand why a man would be attracted to another man, but I can accept that as a fact, that he is, or that a woman is. I can understand why a woman is attracted to another woman, to be honest with you. So that part I get. But these are the normal homosexuals, or the L's and the G's. Yes, I think we should reach out towards them, not least because they are being destroyed by this LGBTQ, 2SIR, etc. Bunch of things. They are being, in a very postmodern sense, dismantled. Their identity is being broken down. And there was a horrible BBC report on how the lesbians are treated by the so-called trans women, men who claim themselves to be women. And they actually need, I think, police protection, or at least legal protection in that sense. But yes, we should definitely reach out to them, because what we represent here is normalcy. That's what conservatism is about. I often say that conservatism is not really an ideology, it is just an adherence to common sense, to normalcy, and to solutions that work. For me, that is at the root of conservatism. The liberal issue. In Hungary, Hungarian society can be said to be conservative. We have our progressives, of course. They tried to unite with the anti-Semitic far right to create a counter in the most recent Hungarian general elections. They are there. We no longer have those classical liberals, or we have them in smaller numbers. So I think inside Fidesz, Peter says, yes, classical liberals are inside Fidesz. What happened in Hungary is that, first of all, this great tradition of Anglo-Saxon classical liberalism was never there in Hungary. It's just historically not there. There was a Hungarian tradition of liberalism, but it was always quite different from the Anglo-Saxon one. And basically, our liberals picked their sides. And they, for the most part, picked the conservative side, and that is why the conservatives are in the majority in Hungary. And maybe that it could be something, if we are an optimist, that could foreshadow a development in the West as well, or further to the West than Hungary, that when eventually the liberals pick sides, most of them will pick the side of common sense, common decency. Let's hope that.
Thank you. As to the question of LGBT community and the division between these communities, my point is that as a Christian conservative, especially when a conservative Christian, Judeo-Christian based government is in power, it should pay huge attention on defending their constitutional rights, regardless of their sexual orientation or individual choices. But my other point is, I'm more conservative on that issue than Zoltán is. So of course, as a human being, I would do anything to defend another human being, regardless of their sexual orientation. But as a conservative community, I think we should not open the door for them and create within our parties LGBTQ communities and LGBTQ groups, because once you allow the so-called regular traditional gay movements in a community, since they are revolutionary leftist based ideologies, they're gonna ask for more and more and more, and after a while, with a real conservative party, could happen what happened with the CDU in Germany. Now you can easily throw away the C from the party, because it's not a Christian-based party anymore, because they embraced all ideologies and all, forms of lives which does not belong to the concept of a traditional conservative Christian party. So first we should defend as conservatives every lifestyles and defend every individual regardless of their concept of sexuality or whatever, but I would not let these officially into conservative communities because of the revolutionary ideas behind these movements, which are going to ask for more and more and more, and an originally conservative community could easily lose their traditions because of the revolutionary leftist small groupings letting inside to their communities. And I totally agree with you about liberals in Hungary, and you need to understand that the Hungarian society is majority socially conservative. That means that the majority of the society embraces social conservative issues, but from an economic side, it's rather socialist. And it might be because of our communist past that they got used to that there is a paternalistic state who is always there for them, and there is a huge social network. And I think that is why the Hungarian conservatives could be that successfully in the past 12 years because, of course, socially the governing parties is very, very conservative. That is why the liberal media describe them as fascist and nationalistics and so on. But on the economic side, there are some socialist elements on the economic program of the governing parties. Of course, there are a lot of classical liberal and conservative elements like flat tax, flat income tax, flat corporate tax, and so on. But from some social questions, the Hungarian government is still maintaining this social network to which the Hungarian society got used to in the past couple of decades.
Thank you very much. And let's see if we have one more. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Hrvoje and I have a question for Peter and Zoltan, since you both coming from Hungary. From Croatian mainstream media, we get information about the poor state of human rights in Hungary. What is your view on the rule of human rights in Hungary?
Sometimes we feel as if we live in Saudi Arabia. I mean, our women have to wear veils, can't sit behind the wheels. I mean, we have trained crocodiles that are on the border that will bite off any liberal's leg who dares to enter. BBC journalists have their lips sewn together. Deutsche Welle, they are burned at the stake, but for the witches that they are. And we regularly carpet bomb drag queen story hours. Yes. Okay, all jokes aside, we really don't even know what to say about this. The Hungarian fundamental rights, the fundamental law, our constitution has very firm guarantees that are fully in line with all the international human rights documents. I have never heard a single charge that called about Hungarian human rights abuses specify which human right was abused. They never say this. It's a bit like the claims of anti-Semitism. You also hear that quite often in the Western press, that Hungary is somehow anti-Semitic. They never ask the Hungarian Jewish organizations or even the international Jewish organizations, because these Jewish organizations may be affected by political ideology, and some of them are quite liberal. But one thing for them is sacrosanct, protecting Jewish people worldwide. And therefore, anti-Semitism they take very seriously, and they will not lie on this issue for political convenience. Ask any Jewish organization anywhere in the world if Hungary is in the top 10 best countries for Jewish people to live. Yes, it is. And in the same sense, individual cases of human rights violations occur in every country. Of course, we typically refer to those things as crimes. And those crimes are punished in Hungary. And the state works extremely hard to protect everybody's human dignity, fundamental rights, human rights. We haven't even heard accusations against the Hungarian police, for example. Listen to all these liberal whining in the New York Times and The Economist and The Guardian. For some reason, they whine about the Hungarian state, about human rights violations here. They haven't said a negative word about the Hungarian police. How are these newspapers not full of stories of police abuses in Hungary? Because there aren't any. Can you imagine a regime that would trample human rights without an abusive police force? Can you? So all of this is just made up. It's just fairy tales. The whole exercise is based on the precept of Nazi Germany that the more often you tell a lie, the easier for people it is to believe. Unfortunately, they were right on that subject, and right now the leftist liberal press is simply abusing this aspect of human nature, that if you are told enough lies, you will believe it. Right?
So, I have two answers for that, a legal one and a political one. So you have to know that the chapter in the Hungarian constitution, which is enlisting the basic fundamental rights, is based almost 100% on the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. So it fully complies with all of the EU regulation, and it was worded intentionally by the Hungarian parliament accordingly to the EU regulations. And I might be biased, but I think even within the European Union, Hungary is one of the freest countries when it comes to basic rights. Because there is a balanced media landscape, you can exercise all of your human rights, what is important in the free world, in a democracy, and there is no oppression from any part of the state over you, and you are not misled intentionally by the press and by the politician more than in any other Western countries. And on the other hand, in the past 12 years, Zoltán and me and mostly all of our colleagues have had arguments and debates with Europeans from the progressive left. And we have been always accused that you have rule of law problem in Hungary, you have press freedom problem in Hungary, you have human rights problem in Hungary. And when our counter question was to this very progressive European politician or think tank leader or whatever, that name one specific issue which upon you're basing your criticism towards Hungary and the Hungarian political system. And in my past 12 years history of dealing with NGOs and politicians, I never got a specific answer. What's the real problem with Hungary is? I always got an answer. You know, the overall picture is bad because I read in the Deutsche Welle or Süddeutsche Zeitung or Politico or Euractiv that there are human rights issues, there are human rights problems, there are rule of law problems. So my point is that they cannot name even one specific problem in Hungary. They always claim that the overall picture is bad because they have read some articles in certain liberal pro-Brussels newspapers or media outlets. And of course, these media outlets and especially the Brussels institutions, I mean the main institutions of the European Union and some NGOs and the society, civil societies linked to the Brussels decision-making are infiltrated with Hungarian leftist intellectuals and politicians, and they created a landscape about the country in the West that it's like a fascistic, totalitarian dictatorship, of course, which is not, but they don't have enough information about Hungary. They only have secondary sources like liberal media outlets and Hungarian leftist politicians, and they are basing their argumentation on this falsified picture what the leftist media and the leftist politicians are creating about the Hungarian rule of law situation.
Thank you for the answers. Okay, so we have come pretty much to the end of our panel. I would like to thank all of you for being so patient and participating very actively to hear what our guests from Hungary had to say. So a big round of applause for them today.